People over 75 could be asked to give up their free TV licence under plans being considered by the BBC. The Beeb is facing a £650 million bill for taking on the cost of free TV licences from 2020. That's part of a funding settlement with David Cameron's government. A report on ways to appeal for voluntary contributions from over 75s is due later this year. Remember, it would be voluntary. Media reports suggest older celebrities could front a publicity campaign to push for contributions. The likes of Terry Wogan out there encouraging you to pay for your TV licence. Anne Watson from the Northern Ireland Pensioners Parliament. What do you make of this, Anne?
Well, I would like to know how they're going to assess people as to how well they can afford it. And it's easy for Terry Wogan to stand up and say he's not going to have any difficulty paying it.
Well, they're not going to assess people, are they? This is voluntary. They're going to appeal to people's better senses.
No, they're going to make people feel guilty. And that's what they do. And older people are the best people to do that with. You're actually getting to the stage where you're nearly feeling guilty because you're getting old. And that's what they're doing every time you turn it on. Too many older people.
Yeah, but older people aren't stupid, are they?
No.
So they can make a decision for themselves. They can think to themselves, should they be contributing towards the BBC fund?
Older people have contributed all their lives. And they paid their taxes. They paid their national insurance stamps. Margaret Thatcher reduced the pension, promising to bring it back up again. She never done it. Now they have to fill in a mountain of forms before they can get a little bit of benefit to try and bring their money up that they can live on to heat and eat, which is the most important thing. Some of those older people, the television's the only outside line they have with the world.
But come on, Anne, there's no one encouraging an older person who is on the poverty line, who is finding it hard to make ends meet, to pay for the TV licence when they're over 75. This is about those people who feel that they've got an extra couple of quid and they don't need it.
I think that's wonderful. You see all those people that are all that extra quids, you see the money that they get at Christmas, why don't they give it to some of these charities instead of, and make it known that they're giving that money to charities instead of coming in now and encouraging older people to pay their television licences.
This funding the free TV licence for over 75, it costs the government, it costed the government $608 million in 2013-14. That's about a fifth of the BBC's budget.
And what are we getting for it?
What do you mean?
Sure, some of the things are rubbish. Things that have been on years ago, they're bringing back again. And there's repeats and repeats and repeats. Now, I'm not complaining about that because older people don't mind that because they can see the bill or they can see something else that they saw 20 years, 30 years ago, and it brings back memories of when their house was full of people. Instead of now they're sitting on their own watching it and it's the only thing they have sometimes.
Because if you think about what older people get, right? They get a free, don't they get free bus passes, free public transport when they're over 60?
Yeah. And they help.
What's that all about?
Excuse me. See that free bus pass? Take that away and there'll be riots in the streets.
Come on.
I'm telling you, older people, the ones that are able to
listen,
get
we've had Jimmy Bryson saying he's pulling out of the flag protest. We don't want pensioner protests now, do we?
Who are able to get out, use that bus pass to go into town, meet their friends, go into a cafe, spend a little bit of money on a cup of coffee.
If you follow that,
come out and buy shopping, which is good for the economy.
If you follow that logic, then buses would be free for all of us.
Why?
Well, because you're saying it helps the economy because the pensioners are coming in and out of town and out of the shops.
Yeah, because they wouldn't be able to do it at the price of the buses if they didn't have that bus pass. I know people myself who go out to meet friends that they wouldn't be able to meet. They used to go out together, can't afford to go out at nights now and can't afford to do that, but they'll go into town and meet them for a cup of coffee maybe once a month, once a fortnight or whatever, and they spend that. That's good for the restaurants. They're getting an extra customer or two, plus they will go in town and buy bits and pieces. And usually for grandchildren or something like that, which is another thing they do to help people with their grandchildren.
Gregory Campbell from the DP. And stay there. I like you, Anne. I like you. I like your style. Morning, Gregory.
Good morning, Stephen.
I don't like you.
Yeah, well, I think most people sort of got that, but however...
I'm joking.
You're
I'm joking.
Back, month off.
I'm joking, Gregory. Happy New Year.
Okay. And the same to you, Stephen. Good to see you back after so long away.
I only had a couple of weeks off. Did you miss me?
I think you were away for about 4 weeks. Is that right? And you're the person who often attacks and criticises teachers for having long breaks.
I see you didn't get a new phone from Santa. Anyway, what do you think of this, Gregory? What do you think?
Well, I think this has all the appearance, Stephen, of a kite flying exercise. So I don't know how the average senior citizen will think about this whenever they see the likes of Tim Wogan and Michael Parkinson, celebs who, by their very nature, are reasonably well off. Most people would say that they can well afford to pay a contribution towards £144 a year. So I don't know how they would take to that. This has the appearance of a kite flying exercise. She have got this, they've got the onus is on them now to meet this bill because the government has passed the buck over to the BBC. BBC are now trying to their cloth accordingly, and it would appear they're going to put this out. There'll be very little response, and I think they know there will be very little response. And then they come back and say, well, what are we going to have to do now? It's the voluntary scheme. So what would they do then if a voluntary scheme doesn't work? That's why people will look at this kite flying exercise to see what the reaction would be if they were to move to say, well, we cannot finance an over 75 free licence scheme.
Well, you must be close enough to 75 yourself. Would you pay voluntarily?
Well, Stephen, I don't think it should be a case. I'll ignore the comment about my age, but I don't think it should be a case of anyone having to volunteer. This is something that has been hard won for generations and shouldn't be on the table. It's as simple as that. I mean, remember, and you raised the issue about, for example, the free fares for elderly.
Yeah.
You remember the kite flying exercise there was a few months about that? That perhaps we could change it somewhat to ensure that only certain categories of people over a certain earnings limit would qualify.
Exactly.
Again, an attempt to fly a kite to see how well would this go down if we were to restrict it.
Yeah.
No, it's not on the table, and it shouldn't be on the table.
I know you and I are having a bit of banter this morning, but there is a serious part behind this, Gregory, and it is that colleagues like you, of yours, the likes of Simon Hamilton, for example, the health minister, he could well do with any extra money that government has. So when you think of it, we are giving some pensioners who don't need a free bus pass that resource when money could be spent elsewhere. In an economy where there's plenty of free cash, these issues don't come up. In this present climate, when people are being told that their services are being cut, there's not enough money for the education budget, etc., then these questions are pertinent.
Yeah, Stephen, but let's come back to this issue of the BBC. Remember, the BBC are flying this kite because the baby has now stopped with them. The government have said the government, i.e. the taxpayer, are no longer going to fund a free licence scheme for over 75s. You, the BBC, must meet this cost. Now, that's exactly a matter for the BBC to determine what they intend to do about that. They must decide that. If they've come up with this kite-flying exercise, it's not going to work. Then they have to go away and decide what other means they're going to try and meet. They're going to try and put in place to meet the shortfall of cash.
Although,
is what this is about.
Watson, you're with the Pensioners Parliament. Some of these celebs are very influential, particularly with older people, actually. If Wogan's out there pushing this, if he is, Michael Parkinson, very powerful brands, encouraging pensioners.
Pensioners are no fools, and they realise these people can afford to pay it. The ones that are out there telling them, oh, you should pay it, and oh, it would be good, and don't feel bad that you shouldn't get it, because why should you get it when you can afford to pay it? That's all very fine for the ones who can afford to pay it. What I'm concerned about are the people who will feel guilty because they're not paying it, and will maybe pay it and can't afford to pay it, and will have to do without something else.
But Anne, put yourself in the shoes of a young person, right? Maybe a 21, 22-year-old.
Yep.
And they're desperate to get a job and they cannot get a job.
Yep.
They have to pay their TV licence.
Yep.
If there's a TV in their house.
Yeah, that's right.
If they want to go into town to see their mates, if they want to go into town shopping, they want to move about in a bus, they're not being handed a free bus pass. And meanwhile, they're looking at the other end of the spectrum, the elderly people, and they're thinking, hold on a minute. So there's no one suggesting the people in the middle who are out working should be getting these freebies. But what about the young person, the young unemployed person?
Yeah.
How are they going to feel with all this?
They're going to feel bad. I can well appreciate that. But that doesn't alter the fact that where that young person is today, maybe not unemployed, but certainly on a low wage. How many of the older people have been there, done that, and weren't getting the things that young people get today, and weren't having the schemes to train them for new jobs that young people are getting today. So as far as that's concerned, I feel sorry for young people. It's very hard for them. But we have lived through that. We have been there, done that, got the T-shirt.
Jim in Belfast, what do you think, Jim? Morning.
Good morning. Well, I agree 100% with your last caller. And just one other thing I'd like to bring up. I pay the licence, which by law I have to, but I don't watch BBC programmes. So why should I pay for something I don't use?
Well, you clearly listen to BBC programmes because you're listening to one now.
To your programme, that's all right, yes. But I don't have free choice in the matter, in the sense of who gets my money. I think it's time now that the BBC is run the same as ITV on advertisements. That would be the fairest way. But also, I read in the paper, I think it was 2 weeks ago, that the BBC received £2 million grant from the EU on top of what it gets from the British taxpayer.
I have no idea if they do or they don't.
This is the whole point. You see, these are things that the general public don't know anything about. They should, because they're the ones paying the money. But I think it's unfair. So it is the old age pensioners. And as that lady had said, they've been there, they've done it.
There is a
they've worked all their lives.
There is a whole new. I don't get that much time to sit down and read at my leisure, Jim. When I was off there on my, Gregory said on my lengthy holiday, as he would put it, I was reading about the whole state of the television industry and the future, and I actually didn't. I know we've talked about it before, but I didn't take in how much choice an ordinary, viewer now has. It's quite extraordinary, actually. And the next generation that's coming up through, that's got Netflix to watch, and they're watching a lot on YouTube. I was astonished, Jim, that some of these YouTubers now have millions and millions of followers. So the whole model, here's what I'm trying to say, the whole model of the conventional broadcaster, they broadcast programmes and you've only got a few choices, that's gone. That's kaput. And
another point too. I read in the paper a couple of weeks ago that you can watch BBC programmes without having a television licence, provided they're recorded programmes. So where does the sense come into that?
I think the government's looking at that.
You see, I would strongly recommend that a leaflet be posted to every home in the United Kingdom that pays the television licence with the do's and the don'ts, because the general public need information. It's not a question of locking them in a room and only telling them what you want to tell them, because the things come out now in papers, and I object very, very strongly. And you made a remark about the young people. I have worked all my life, so I have. I was only out of work for 2 weeks.
Look, that's
fine. All my working life.
That's fine, Jim, and I get that. But from a young person's perspective that is desperate to get a job and cannot get a job, they want to be able to watch telly, don't they?
Yes.
We're not.
Certainly.
So there is.
But then, how many of those young people are living on their own and need a licence? A lot of them, I would say about 80% of them, still live with their parents. So their parents have paid the licence for the home that they live in. So I think your argument's beat on that point.
I'm just putting forward a scenario.
Yeah.
Where you've got a genuine young man, young woman, and they can't even get a free bus or train into town. They're hard up, they're on the dole, they're desperate for a job, and they're watching a pensioner with a BMW in the driveway with a free bus pass.
Well, that's very, very good if he has a BMW.
And a free TV licence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but they've paid all their lives, so they have.
Not necessarily.
Well, tell me this, just as a matter of interest, just to take you on a sidetrack a minute. At the moment, to get your pension, you have to have 49 stamps. From this coming April, all you'll need is 30 stamps. So who's going to pay the difference?
Yeah.
The 19 stamps, 19 years, that's going to be extra on the young people coming up. So they're going to have to pay for it.
This is a really, really interesting conversation we can have today. Lots of issues within this. One, the privileges and how much we prioritise some of our elderly citizens in this country. Lots of you of that particular age group listening to this show this morning. I know that. So pick up the phone, 03030 80 55 55, 03030 80 55 55. There's another conversation, though, isn't there, about the whole model of watching telly these days and the whole status of the BBC. So you know the score. It used to be that you had... I remember the days, for goodness sake, before Channel 4 came. But anyway, it used to be until very, very recently, you had your main channels. Fair enough, you had Sky, and that was it. And so the likes of the BBC was in a dominant situation. I'll say this again. I'm flabbergasted, just because I've been looking at this while I was away there in America. I'm flabbergasted at the amount of kids that are putting a camera into their bedroom these days, and they're making TV shows of their own. Now, you might say, well, that's a good hobby. It ain't a hobby. They've got millions of followers. A lot of these kids have more followers than the BBC has watching a programme, than ITV has, what UTV has watching some of their programmes. So that whole model is changing. Why is that relevant today? Well, because we're talking within this discussion about the licence fee, aren't we? You know, the BBC received £3.72 billion from the licence fee. Flip side of this argument, you could argue that the licence fee is even more valuable these days than ever before, because the BBC, in a world where there's going to be a whole plethora of programming being put up, the BBC can be doing things that you really want at a quality level. Look at the likes of Sir David Attenborough, for goodness sake, and the type of programmes that he is making. Right, Charlie Wolf. Morning, Charlie.
Morning, Stephen. How are you?
Doing okay. What do you think?
Well, you know, you're right. The model is changing. My son watches off of his iPad or his phone or off his laptop computer.
Scary.
He watches mainly, he likes elevators. He has a thing for elevators. He watches a guy that takes tours of elevators. He's at the such and such shopping center, and the guy takes his little camera and they go up the place or up the top floor and then go down and watch the buttons and the doors open and shut. And you know, that's what he watches. And there's guys getting product placement. So, you know, the BBC are like putting out the begging bowl. This really sounds strange to me for corporations as big as the BBC is, with the budget they have, that they would go to old people and put out the begging bowl. And they're going to run essentially adverts. Well,
it's about a fifth of the BBC's budget is used to fund free TV licenses for over 75s. A fifth. 608 million.
I'll say this much. I'm not supportive of the government on this one and the BBC giving in to the government. The government shouldn't be telling the BBC, you know, since they do raise their own funds through the licensing, who they should or shouldn't be allowing to watch for free.
Right.
So I think there's an argument there. But, you know, the BBC has to figure a different way of funding itself. You know?
03030 80 55 55. The SDLP MLA, Patsy McGlone's been tweeting about this today. Morning, Patsy.
Hello, Stephen.
What do you think?
Well, I think it'd be pretty stupid to withdraw that from pensioners. But my primary thing, I heard in the news earlier this morning on Good Morning Ulster that they were talking about putting Helen Mirren and Terry Wogan up front to make the case for this. With the greatest of respect, the most of the people that I come into contact are certainly nowhere near the income bracket that Terry Wogan and Helen Mirren, very successful people in their own right. But to put them on to be champions of this, many of the people that I come into contact with are people who are elderly, often on their own, and whose only contact with the outside world, if they're especially badly disabled, is telephone, television, and the carers who come and do a great job to visit them every day. So to withdraw that from many of those people would be a huge lifeline.
Well, they wouldn't be withdrawing. Remember that this would be voluntary, so they would not be withdrawing anything.
I appreciate what you're saying, but we all know what these voluntary things turn to. We all have heard that story before. tested, dip it in the water first, and then make it mandatory. We know the direction that they're attempting to go. I think it would be very stupid move on behalf of the BBC. I also think it's not particularly smart to put on exceptionally well-heeled people to champion the cause of this in the first instance. But I really think for our elderly people, we have a growing older population. The nature of policy is to try and keep people in their own homes and to make that more difficult for them and to place people, many of whom are just having to eke by on their pension credit, to draw deeper into their pockets would be a stupid move.
Different culture in America, Patsy, but it's just struck me, public service radio in America is funded by contributions. You will have community organisations, you will have individuals. Yes, you'll have wealthy people, but you will also have individuals that think to themselves, do you know what? And this is in America, obviously, where there's no TV licence. They value public service broadcasting and they make a contribution towards it.
Yes, that's a fair point, but you could argue that all the rest of us are making a contribution towards that, and why shouldn't we? I don't have any problem making a contribution paying the TV licence, and I'm sure you don't. But in doing that, just like a pension, just like whatever, you're investing in the future. And if I'm doing that and if I'm helping older people to just get a wee bit more comfort in their home, a bit more connection with the outside world, I'm happy enough to do that.
But it's costing it costed 608 million for 2013-14. Those are the latest figures we have, right? So if that's similar to what it's still costing, let's put that in context. 608 million. Well, the whole budget for BBC Radio 4, for example, is 91 million. So that's, it's 7 times Radio 4's yearly budget.
Well, I don't know entirely all of what Radio 4 does, but and I listen occasionally to it on good station. But if this is an investment in older people, if this is an investment in keeping older people more comfortable, more in touch, more happy in their own home environment, I'm happy enough with that.
Graham in Portadown. Morning, Graham. Thank you, Patsy. Morning, Graham.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks.
Good morning, Stephen. It's hard to see a politician run when there's a grey vote behind him. He's definitely not going to go against that one. But my point is this morning is that all these things, dog licence, free home heating oil, bus passes, TV licence, are not actual benefits. They're gifts given to the government when they can afford it. We can no longer afford it. And as for people actually paying into the system, well, yeah, they did pay into the system. But when they paid into the system, they paid a national insurance stamp or whatever as an expectation of getting a pension and being looked after health-wise in their old age. That is run by the previous generation. The generation today will fund my retirement and the next generation at 4, and so on. So these are privileges, and the privileges can be taken away. And if pensioners can afford, to run a TV, they can afford a TV licence.
Right, well, let's see how you respond to that. Stay there, Graham. Samuel, you're 74. How would you respond to what Graham said? He's essentially saying if you can afford it, pay up.
Right. I have great difficulty in listening to all this garbage about old age pensioners' bus passes. How many old age pensioners, so-called, the age has been dropped to 60 for them to get a bus pass? They are still going out to work. People are complaining about the young people not being able to get a job. Those guys and women of age 60 are going to work, henceforth taking jobs that the young people could get. As regards the TV licence, I'm 74, as I've said. I have to wait another year until I get a free TV licence. Big deal. As regards BBC are putting on as many repeats as they can trail out of the archives. They are having problems with viewing figures. I wonder why.
Well, why?
Well, we're on about the other channel, the UTV, may I ask, them saying, they get revenue from advertisements. Look at the number of advertisements, shall we call them, that's appearing in between programmes on the BBC.
Well, now they're trails. They're not. Obviously, they're not advertising products. They're advertising other programmes.
Yes, I understand that, but it is absolutely ridiculous the time that is spent on trails. Not only that, if you want to watch the actual programme, all you see is the trail. You already know what's going to happen, so why turn round and watch the programme?
Well, a trail doesn't often do that, and in this world where we're coming in and out, Samuel, of our homes, I guess what the Beeb's trying to do is flag up and promote the best of what it has to make sure you watch it. Bill Jeffrey, morning, Bill. Well, you're getting... How old are you now, Bill?
Next week, I think about 82.
Really?
But, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'll have to check the birth certificate again. I think there's been a mistake made. I only feel about 62.
I would have put you down for in your 60s.
Yeah, that's really what maybe I am. I think there's a mistake.
So...
Hey, I've listened to you for the last 20 minutes, half hour. You've been argumentative this morning, and you have not kept to the subject.
I just think... Well, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I'll say this. None of us want Terry Wogan's charity. We don't want it. We would find it patronising and demeaning. And listen, 63,000 pensioners live officially in penury. That means that they're on the breadline. They've got to make decisions.
It would be voluntary, Bill.
Yeah, okay. I don't think a voluntary system will work whatsoever. It has to be means tested. Anybody getting over 30,000 a year who is labelled as a pensioner should pay the full licence. Most of our pensioners in Northern Ireland get half that or just above it.
Well, you're going a lot further than the BBC's talking about then. You're going to clobber the pensioners that have got a couple of quid.
I am indeed. I am totally in favour of means-tested television licences, and that is a figure of worth £30,000. If they have over that, they can well afford the £144 a year.
Would you do the same for bus passes and train passes?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
My mother and her friend Wee Betty, they're up and down on that Dublin train all the time.
And if
their backsides are never off that seat. And I'll tell you what, see when they lose their bus pass or they lose their free pass, I'm serious.
They're not going to.
They wouldn't put their hand in their purse and pay for it.
I don't think they have the money. I don't think they have
Of course they've got the money. They're milking. They're milking the free passes.
No. I don't think they are. Look, the free passes, the free television, it saves us going into total isolation. Do you want us to just die quietly in it? No. We're sensible, we make a contribution, and we have made major contributions. We want to get out there, we want to talk, we want to know about current
Right.
affairs,
So Bill Jeffrey is proposing this morning that for those pensioners earning over 30 grand a year, in other words, this should be means tested, that they should be paying for what is at the moment free